Don't know why that keeps happening. Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from the Winnipeg Free Press, who, if you listen to the post game, was absolutely dominating the scrums out there because of exactly what I said before. If you needed a reminder of the value of the work that Ken and Mike McIntyre and the Winnipeg Free Press do, it was on full display tonight, as after the loss in Detroit, there was not a lot to talk about from the players' perspective anyways, because there was no one there to ask them questions. The Winnipeg Free Press footing the bill to create all that content for you folks out there. I just wanted to remind you there. I'm not going to do that every single show here, but come on, it's pretty obvious the value of that when you hear Scott Arniel's press conference afterwards, where he just basically has a conversation with Ken for the entirety of it. That's why I'm proud to say that's my boy. That's why I'm proud to say that together with him, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after, I'd say something about this being one of the most surprising or gut-wrenching or gut-punching losses in Winnipeg Jets franchise history. But it's, maybe, in the last 10 days, is it more gut-wrenching than their loss against the Minnesota Wild? I mean, people who had talked before about the Winnipeg Jets finding ways to lose, you got to say that tonight that's probably the case. And let's talk about it while you jump into my Toyota from Jim Pattison Toyota on Region. Hop in for the opening drive, folks, and we'll talk all about it, because this is a game that, if you were looking for what ails the Winnipeg Jets, so much of it has been secondary scoring, right? And so much of it has been that when you do get secondary scoring, maybe those, and this is a stretch to say the least, that, on some of the nights when they do get secondary scoring, they're not getting it from their first line. That happened in the last game, as they scored only one goal and lost to the 2-1 to the Detroit Red Wings. But for the most part, the top line of the Winnipeg Jets is bulletproof and can't be faulted for what's happening. I get the argument, and I know there's some people out there, and I you know what, I go back and I read the comment section for the stuff that I missed, and I notice that there's more and more, like, every point that I make or Ken makes or someone anywhere makes these days, some people agree with, and everyone is pouncing on every single point because everyone's looking to try and figure out what's going wrong with the Winnipeg Jets. And it's hard to pin it down because there's so much that's going wrong with them. Because on a night where they get secondary scoring, on a night where they get their top end scoring, just things fall apart on the back end. Terrible mistake by Eric Comrie that cost the Winnipeg Jets a point in this game. No doubt about that. A lot of people saying he cost them 2 points. He very well may have. I will say this with utter confidence. It's my belief, and this is not going out on a limb at all, that the Winnipeg Jets win that game if Connor Hellebuyck is in net. And I know that a lot of people out there are, they want to say that this loss, I'm seeing it all over the place. This loss is all on Eric Comrie. He didn't help them very much this night. But I will not go down the road of saying this loss is totally at the feet of Eric Comrie. And there's a reason that I won't do that, because I don't see it that way. And I get it. I get that if you're a fan, you want catharsis. You want someone, the lynch mob is out there. The torches are out. The pitchforks are out. You want a bad guy and you want a good guy. And a lot of times your good guy is your hero is or your superhero is Connor Hellebuyck, who, folks, has somehow managed to be the loser of 7 straight games and yet avoid any of the accountability that so easily and readily falls to Eric Comrie. Now, let me make it abundantly clear before people start going in a direction I know you're going to go in here. Eric Comrie is hugely part of the loss for the Winnipeg Jets here tonight. And like I said, let's make it abundantly clear. I think the Jets win this game if Connor Hellebuyck is in net. But the reason why I won't go wholeheartedly and say 2 points out the window, throw it at Eric Comrie, is I'm not searching for the catharsis that you're looking for. I'm not searching to pin this on someone and to, beat the piñata with the stick in this situation. I'm searching for the answers. And if you think that there's not, all you needed to do is listen to that conversation I referenced between Ken Wiebe and the head coach and his problem with his team and the defensive liability they became in this game. And hey, if you take take a look at the numbers here in this situation. High danger scoring chances for. They're 11-11 in this game. This is two teams that did a terrible job of defending their own net, put their goalies in a bad spot, and it shows in a 6-5 game when it's all said and done. Does Eric Comrie lose the Sean Reynolds stat on this night? For sure he does, and I kind of think he does handily, and that's saying a lot because I thought Toronto was terrible in the crease on their end tonight. No doubt about it, but I'm not going to go to the point and say this is all on Eric Comrie and all the stuff that I'm seeing online because A, I don't think it's fair, but B, doing so is ignoring the fact that the Winnipeg Jets found a way to find offense on this night that has been so much their problem for so long and gave themselves an unbelievable opportunity to win this game by finding that offense, not just from the front of the first line, but from secondary scoring sources as well. But they made it way too easy to get quality shots on their goaltender tonight. The numbers show that. Their head coach is preaching on that. And this is a story I've been trying to tell on air, and maybe I get to tell it on air on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday when the Winnipeg Jets move from here to go to the Ottawa Senators, but had a great conversation a while ago with Scott Arniel about the fact that the Winnipeg Jets keep finding ways to lose one-goal games this year compared to winning them so consistently last year. And he'd said, it's just you have to make sure that in these tight moments you are being, he said, it's not 75%, it's not 85%. It has to be 100%. If we're going to get out of this, we can't wait for the bounces that we got. And he'd said it. This is what he said to me. It felt like we got every single bounce last year, and it feels like we're not getting them this year. Well, you know what? That's what we're seeing. You rarely hear me talk about the hockey gods backing up the Winnipeg Jets this year like I did so consistently last year. But if you're not getting the bounces, you got to make your own bounces, but you also have to stop the bounces from going against you. The Winnipeg Jets made their own bounces on this night, and because of that, put the puck in the back of the net, but they were letting bounces go back in their own zone like they were out on the river skipping rocks. And this did not put them in a good situation. Listen, you know what would have really helped the Winnipeg Jets is if when they got that 4-1 lead, they did what they did in the first game that they got Connor Hellebuck back against the Washington Capitals and just shut down their end of the ice and said, we are just prioritizing that they will not get opportunities against our goalie on this night. And that's not what the numbers show. The numbers show as the game turned, so did those things. The shots went in the favor of the Maple Leafs in the third period. The high danger chances went in the favor of the Maple Leafs in this period. And if the Jets are able to stop that, they walk away with a win. Does Eric Comrie own a whole bunch of this? Like I said, he gives away a point and maybe 2 points with that play, which I think is inexcusable at the end there. But I am just not going to go down the road of placing all the blame on one single person when on a night like tonight, you blow a lead like that. There is plenty of blame to go around the entirety of that locker. That, for me, is your opening drive brought to you by the fine folks at Toyota. And I just wanted to say, Jim Pattison Toyota, that's the place you want to head to for any of your vehicle needs. They've always got good deals. About to unveil one coming up for their January promotion coming here. So visit Jim Pattison Toyota on Regent for a test drive today, and make sure you tell them Kenny and Renny sent you when you do exactly that. All right, folks, time to bring in the man who I was talking so glowingly about before, who's driven so much of the storyline after the game here by talking with the coach and the players. Time to bring in the man also with the best music in the business. Here comes Kenny, folks. Kenny, you should have heard it. you
I did hear it.
I was talking you up. I was talking you up before you got onto the
I
show
heard you.
here. Good. Because now I don't have to do it again. I can go back to pretending that you don't contribute much on this podcast here. So now I don't have to regurgitate this stuff out all over again. But
Thanks
you're
for having
looking
me.
good. Your work. Your work's looking good. Your lines are good already. You're on fire already, and of course you're on fire in that suit, and of course you are because it's a Vittorio Rossi special coming from the Frankie and the boys down on Corden Avenue. So if you want to look like Kenny doesn't be on fire like Kenny is already on this show, you know what to do. Head on down to Vittorio Rossi on Corden Avenue. Walk in, loudly proclaim Kenny and Renny sent you. Ask for Frankie and the boys, and they will leave you. Or you will leave that place scorching hot and on fire, just like Ken. Ken, I just want to get to this because, we talked about it on the last show. We didn't have you in Detroit, and we didn't have like the kind of clips that we had that are elicited when you have a conversation of a reporter down there to ask those things. And you absolutely dominated the Gabe Vilardi scrum. You absolutely dominated the Scott Arniel scrum. I wanted to get an idea because Gabe Vilardi can be a prickly interview at times. I thought you got a lot out of him here tonight. Scott Arniel, who would want to talk about that in these situations? But I just want to get your take on where the Winnipeg Jets are, you think, just in how they're handling in this and their response to something that by this point is almost seeming inexplicable.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, first and foremost, I mean, we'll get into Mark Scheifele, in a minute. But yeah, I mean, Gabe Vilardi looked at me about halfway through my question, and I was wondering if it was going to be about a 15-second conversation. But I thought he was very thoughtful and
exactly
insightful.
What I thought. Exactly.
Did you see when he gave me an eyebrow raise pretty early into the preamble?
I thought it was going to be one of the times where the wrestler goes after me and Gino. Was about to happen there. I was oh, this isn't going to work so well.
I was thinking I better get this ship on the ground here, but I mean, I thought he gave a great answer.
Agreed.
Gabe. There are times when Gabe doesn't like to get into the X's and O's, and again, I respect that, but I like the fact that he provided some context and insight on what's happening. And he said, quite frankly, it's not going to change by me standing up here and talking about it for 5 minutes, which again,
he stood up and talked about it for 5 minutes.
Gabe is a no BS kind of person. So
agreed.
Well, it was about 2 minutes, but I thought he said a lot in a short amount of time rather than saying a lot, but really giving you very little, which I really appreciated. I thought that, I mean, again, I know that you referenced the discussion you had with Scott about, there's just not the same level of comfort in those 1-goal games as they've had in the past. I mean, the Jets have been great in 1-goal games previously, and now they can't seem to find a way to keep it on the rails. And, it's just a matter of different ways. I mean, today, Sean, this is a culmination of events here. I mean, Eric Comrie, it's a casual dump in. I mean, he wants to chip the puck to Neil Pionk behind the net, but when he realized that the puck wasn't getting to Neil Pionk, he tries to cover it at the last minute, and Easton Cowan shows incredible hustle on the forecheck to get there before Comrie can cover it. Now, again, there's a communication breakdown, and Sean, this is also, Eric Comrie works his behind off every day, but when you haven't been in the net for 3 weeks in a game, sometimes you're not able to, get the puck where you wanted it to get to. So, I mean, there's obviously frustration there, and naturally that play doesn't happen against a fourth line team or a fourth line situation. It's a guy hustling, and who's in front? Oh, it's Austin Matthews. Here he is. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. He's omnipresent in a game where, the Leafs needed him. The Leafs needed their best player to be their best player. And guess what? On a night when Willie Nylander was not available, Austin Matthews was outstanding. He was the first star in the game. So, I mean, sort of series of events, but like that sequence is another sequence like we've been seeing. I mean, we've been talking about Groundhog Day and rinse and repeat, but this wasn't a rinse and repeat for the Jets. They put up 5 goals for the first time in what feels like forever. I mean, but then they absolutely implode defensively. So yeah, I mean, it's a wild scenario right now for the Jets. And this is simple, Sean. If you or I had said before the game, or if someone had said to us, the Jets are going to score a 5, put up a 5 spot and chase Joseph Wall in the second period, we would have thought they were off to the races. And, they weren't, as it turns out. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the post, I think all three people handled themselves incredibly well because, hey, we get it. Sean, we've been in there. We've been in those rooms when teams are winning, when teams are losing, all of those things. Nobody likes talking after a loss. It's hard to find new questions when a team has lost 8 games in a row.
Yeah.
But you have to do your best, and you're trying to elicit smart responses. And we're doing the best that we can on those fronts. And
how about this one, Ken? Nicole saying the post game with 55 was heartbreaking.
Oh, I mean, I'm just going to put it right now. I mean, I didn't want to sit at the buffet for half an hour here before I got to it. But yeah, I mean, again, the interview is winding down. Mark knows I need to ask. I know I need to ask it. I'm trying to pick the right time and the right tone. And, Mark was, I loved his honesty, Sean. He was vulnerable in that situation. He found it within himself to say the classy thing about Hockey Canada and how great it is in the country and how tough it is to make the team. But he also made it clear he was devastated, right? I mean, I applaud Mark for showing vulnerability in that interview. I don't think he could have come off any better, to be honest. I think that he showed his emotion, he showed his disappointment, but he also was classy enough to, not rip Hockey Canada for it. And then again, the follow-up, I thought Mark handled the follow-up even better than the initial question, which he handled excellently. His ability to, when I asked him if he felt that there was anything else he could do, he quite frankly said, I think I'm playing the best hockey of my career. And if that's what you're going to do in the year leading up to the Olympics, and quite frankly, for 2 years, Sean, that was all he could do. And, we also found out that Mark is remaining in the testing protocol and is one of those players Doug Armstrong referenced in the conference call and in the press conference, that he is on the injury list, list of players, much like he was last year, right up to when the Four Nations team headed over to Montreal.
I just wanted to touch on this.
Thank you, Nicole.
Nicole says you asked the questions in the kindest possible way, Ken. This isn't always my strong point, Ken. This. Ken has described me sometimes as the bulldog in the past. I think sometimes I'm more apt to lean into the questions where there's hard questions that need to be asked. I asked them in a blunt manner. I think probably the players would tell you if you ever had conversations with the players about what it's like to deal with the media, I think that they'd lean into the idea that Ken is very good at this. I think they understand that I'm a person who's just like, look, we got to get to something, so let's just get to it, right? Which is kind of I wouldn't say it's the tact I take. It's just, I've just found that's just naturally kind of who I am, and it goes like that. But Nicole is pointing out a real strength of yours, Ken, and it's something that was probably appreciated and well served to talk with Mark Scheifele in this situation here. And here, this is another one. Kenny, always so respectful and compassionate, says M Dubs. I would very much agree. Okay. I wanted to get into something here. This right off the bat, because there's so many tanking conversations that are happening. Absolute white hot take, and not the good kind here. Joe from Winnipeg, who says people assume that winning the draft lottery guarantees us a good player. It doesn't guarantee us anything but a pick. McKenna will never sign in Winnipeg. He'll just wait it out in the NCAA until UFA. I'm glad you laughed, Ken.
Sorry.
Gavin McKenna is the kind of player who who thinks the way a player like that thinks, especially what he's done at the ages of 15, 16 at the WHL level. Some of it, clearly, Ken, one of the greatest young player careers in WHL history. I know things aren't necessarily going great for him, although they're going pretty darn good for him at the NCAA, but he's not at Macklin Celebrini levels or even Adam Fantilli levels. But he sure is opening eyes again when it comes to his performance at the World Junior Tournament, which quite often is the biggest barometer that people follow. You're not this kind of player and saying, hey, I'm going to give away 3 years of my NHL career because I don't want to go to this place. You take a look time and time again. First overall pick, guys, they adore the idea of going someplace and just entirely letting, being like, I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to be the centerpiece of it, and I'm going to turn this franchise around. Now, I know there's examples of first overall picks and people, because like I said at the beginning of this, people are going to be picking apart every single point that's made. And I know guys like Eric Lindros exist and different things like this. Gavin McKenna is not going to sit. Now, I don't think he's going to do this either. I could see a scenario or there's an actual potential tiny fraction possibility that he would try and force a trade if he didn't want to go to an organization. I don't see that happening, but Gavin McKenna is not sitting and aging out in university waiting to go to a different team other than the Winnipeg Jets. This is maybe an all-time Flame and Comfort hot take, and well-deserving of the hot take, brought to you by Flame and Comfort, Manitoba's premier supplier of fireplaces, wood stoves, inserts, and everything hearth-related. After 50 years heating up your world, Flame and Comfort has moved 1465 St. James Street. You'll find it will be one of the most impressive showrooms in Western Canada. You don't need your hot takes to keep that warm feeling inside. Visit Flame and Comfort. They'll take care of it for you. Okay, Ken.
I need a quick rebuttal here for Joe. I mean, Joe, we appreciate you coming in, Joe. You're a regular, I know, but based on what? Like, this isn't a guy who forced his way out of Medicine Hat. He chose to go for a career path. It wasn't that he was disappointed in how it was going. I mean, his team literally just won the Western Hockey League championship.
Lost in the Memorial Cup final. Yeah.
Lost in the final. So, I mean, this isn't a guy who he went to the NCAA for his path, not because he was forcing his way out. So
for the path that has become the new path for players to go, and also the financial ramifications of taking that path. This isn't a guy who's like forcing his way out of situations. This is again, I don't think there's any doubt about it. Absolute hot take.
Sorry, this is we got pristine roofing wake up territory here.
There you go.
Kevin Chevrolet will let McKenna rot in the minors. Come on now.
456 says yes. Chevy will let McKenna rot in the minors. Definitely worthy of
first overall pick. If they get it, they'll definitely not leave him in the minors under any circumstances. No.
That's a wake up call, and you know what that means. Time to give North End Rick the Pristine Roofing wake up call at 204-981-6289. He's the one you want down at your place for all your roofing, siding, and exterior needs. You can also call Pristine Roofing directly at 204-237-7663. Give Pristine Roofing, give your home the Pristine Roofing and Siding wake-up call. You will be glad you did. People are just forcing these things out of the box, Kenny. I can't keep these ads from popping up here because people are forcing our hands in this situation. I had
love the passion, though. Love the passion.
No doubt. I had my say when it came to Eric Comrie in this game. If you want to just kind of handle what you saw here tonight and what it meant to the game.
Yeah, I mean, so super interesting, right? So Leafs get a breakaway right out of the gate. I mean, or partial break, whatever you want to call it. Austin Matthews finds Max Domi. And honestly, everyone on press row thought we were going to hear a buzzer, Sean. It looked like it was in real time.
Yeah.
Until seeing the replay. Backhand roof job. It looked like it was either middle bar or back crossbar. But Domi got it up so quickly that it hit the crossbar flat out. And it was, and then, Sean, you and I were talking, right? Matthew Nyes gets a breakaway, and then Eric Comrie actually plays it incredibly calmly and, runs him out of real estate, essentially. And I think he still made the save. But and then instead of the Jets being down 2-0, they find their way to get themselves going. Comrie did make some important saves in the first period and even in the second. But, yeah, I mean, this wasn't a good enough start for Eric Comrie. I mean, there's some absolute beautiful shots. Matthews shot tremendous. Michelli, it's literally bar down right where the post meets the crossbar. So again, I don't think there's a ton of softballs in there or soft goals, but Sean, this is simple. For a team that's struggling offensively, you can't have an 800 save percentage in the game. I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean,
and you can't make that mistake at the end.
No, exactly. And I mean, I think he kind of overplayed the Stetcher one-timer a little bit. in coming across. But again, I'm not here for the technical side. But I mean, in Eric's last 2 starts, he's given up 11 goals, and that's not going to work. I mean, that's not going to work for any team. Eric's numbers now, we praised Eric for his numbers when they were strong out of the gate, but right now his I think his save percentage has dropped to 880, and his goals against is now at 349. At one point, Sean, it was at 251. He's added an additional goal to his goals against. Now, again, I'm one of the first to say, and so have you, that the Jets, in a lot of those games during his 12 of 13 starts, Jets weren't very good in front of him, but this was a game where Eric needed at least one more save. And sorry, Chris Thiessen, yes, it did go off. I think the Stetcher shot does change direction there, and that's kind of why it made it look like he was kind of out of position. But yeah, I mean, it just Eric hasn't played in 3 weeks, and he did his best to stay sharp and be ready. But this wasn't this was not his A+ game. And I mean, again, the Jets have 16 games this month, Sean. Eric's going to need to play a couple of those games. And somebody had asked, why did Hellebuyck not play? I mean, Hellebuyck can't play every game. He's played 8 in a row already coming out of the break. He hasn't played 8 in a row since the David Riddick era, Sean. We've referenced this a long time, often off the air. When Kent Johnston scored that turnaround wrister in Columbus, Jets didn't play him again until game 82 when they qualified for the playoffs. They ran Hellebuyck 13 in a row. You can't be running him 13 in a row in an Olympic year. I know it was not a busy night last night in Detroit in terms of volume or difficulty, but I don't, again, all the people saying they should have started Hellebuyck are the same people saying, why the hell did the Jets start Eric Comrie in the back-to-back in Edmonton when they gave up 4 in the first period? So you can't have it both ways. The Jets did the right thing in starting Comrie, but Sean, I mean, there were people in the press box from the Toronto market that were wondering if Scott Arniel would consider going to Hellebuyck for the third after Austin Matthews scored that late power play goal.
Yeah.
Now, again, you want to give your starter the night off, but I think that was Scott Arniel knowing he needs Comrie to get going and showing the confidence in him to stick with him. But it didn't work.
Sometimes it's and it's funny because are there ever a lot of lessons for Scott Arniel in this year? Sometimes it's just about doing the right thing, and when it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out for you. And here's the thing: to me, it's a lot of mental gymnastics to talk about a goaltender that's lost 7 straight games and say it's ridiculous that you didn't put him in for the 8th straight. Like that's crazy talk to me, right? But hey, this fan base is crazy about Connor Hellebuyck, right? They'll
Right.
always overlook the things that aren't going well, and they'll always prop up or assign value. I was joking with someone earlier tonight that if the Winnipeg Jets would have won that game 5-4 and Connor Hellebuyck was in net, the storyline that you'd hear from fans afterwards were, well, he closed the door at the end when it mattered most. And actually, the Winnipeg Jets got a boost in offense because of all the confidence they get from having him in the net. Now, the one thing I will say about this is this ends up being another one of these nights where it almost works in the opposite direction, where we talk about Eric Comrie has had to face a higher degree of difficulty because the team doesn't play as well in front of him. This is another night where things get really leaky, and I'd like you to kind of address Scott Arniel's comments, because Scott Arniel I thought what he focused on most, and he never even brought up Eric Comrie in this situation here. And I don't think as a coach, it's often that you say, well, our goalie needed to be better. I don't think it's a bad thing when you say it. I think it should have been said on this night. But the fact of the matter is Scott Arniel was not happy with how the Winnipeg Jets had a 4-1 lead and allowed this to turn into what he called, I believe, a pond hockey game at some point.
Yeah, no doubt. And that was the biggest issue. I mean, Scott Arniel, I mean, he didn't use the words Jekyll and Hyde, Sean, but he may as well have. He basically said one line would go over the boards and play a perfect shift.
Yeah.
And then they'd go out in the next shift and either do something silly in terms of puck management or turn it over in the neutral zone or forget to check their man. Like, it just was wild the way that, like, we call them momentum swings, and occasionally, the games have mood swings where things, smash back and forth, and you're wondering, how one team can look so great in one shift. And then, I mean, the Leafs were the same, Sean. Leafs were defense optional for a lot of that game also. It was a very, very loose game. Both coaches are thinking, what in the hell is going on out here? So, I mean, it was wild. There's no doubt that the Jets need to be better. They know it. Yeah, I mean, it's just baffling, and it's especially baffling to Scott Arniel because he just watched his team play three pretty structurally sound games. Yes, there were errors, there were turnovers that cost them, but they got back to structure. And today they showed almost no example of structure in the game, which was completely confusing because they went back to defending with commitment, and then they completely didn't defend almost at all.
Okay, so Ken, I wanted to ask you a question based on that. What do you think are the odds of, it's been so long since the Winnipeg Jets felt like they kind of opened things up offensively, and that maybe once they got the juices flowing and started getting hungry for offense, they did what teams that lack confidence, what teams that lack structure, what teams that are struggling the way the Winnipeg Jets often do, and that they kind of just got on their toes and started leaning forward trying to score goals, and in the process kind of forgot to take care of the back end of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's not snake charmer, but it was a kind of, reversion to, I mean, even pre-snake charmer hockey. Like this was almost like damn the torpedoes going opening it up, right? I mean, it was
to that point, Ken, how often did you see a Winnipeg Jets player who was back and tried to make a play on a contested puck rather than falling back and defending, getting it chipped in behind him and creating odd man rushes, and in one case a breakaway? Like this was a night where there was a lot of turnovers at the Jets blue line because they were cheating for offense up front and ended up giving away quality chances on the back end. Didn't always end up in the back of their net, but to me, what I saw was a mentality of a team that was just, and I wonder about it, Ken, because we've talked about this, and Scott Arniel has talked about this. We talk about it in the media, but the idea of, well, what's been the problem for the Winnipeg Jets the last little while? What was their problem in that game against the Minnesota Wild? Well, they didn't get the next goal, right? You get that next goal, and now it's a 2-goal. Well, tonight, the Jets went out, and they're like, we're going to get that next goal, and they did. And then they're like, we're going to go get the next one, and they did. And then all of a sudden, it's like they forgot that a 4-1 lead's a pretty darn good lead. Maybe we should sit back on this for a while. And they went out and they tried to go get that 3-goal lead back. And then it shrunk to, a 1-goal lead. And then they tried to go get that back. And then all of a sudden, I think for them, it's almost like the worst thing that could have happened tonight, Ken, is when the Leafs tied it up 4-4, the Jets went out and got another goal right away afterwards. And then what it looked like to them was like, okay, let's continue doing what we're doing, stay on our toes and try and score that next goal and put this one out of reach. I just see a team that is so far away from the structure, and the structure, not just the structure of the game that they play, the X's and O's, but the structured mind of really good teams who know the things and know the nuances of the game and when to push and when not to push. They're so far off of that they just got pushing in a direction and left a huge vacuum behind them. And the Toronto Maple Leafs were able to move in and fill that vacuum and fill the net in doing so.
Yeah, I mean, my only counter to that, Sean, would be I think it kind of happened before that time, right? I think that the Jets weren't the strategy wasn't sound enough when they were up 4-1 and 4-2. Now, obviously, once it got to 4-3 and 4-4, then yes, I do think that they kind of opened it up, but they kind of opened it up before that, which was kind of getting off brand. And quite frankly, I don't think it is related to confidence because they played so soundly defensively with the exception of the turnovers in the last 3 games. So I don't know. It just was very, they look like a team lacking confidence to me, Sean. So I think there's no other way to put it. I mean, when you've been losing a ton of 1-goal games and you get a lead, you kind of want to put the pedal to the metal and put the team away, but they did it kind of in a silly manner that left them kind of vulnerable to, being scored upon by, skilled players and just kind of making some mistakes that, again, I don't want to call them uncharacteristic because they've happened a lot this year, but they weren't happening necessarily as often out of the break. And that's kind of just a lapse in, mental lapse for a team that's kind of lacking confidence.
I think we're saying the same thing. I think you're just being a contrarian right now, if I'm being honest here. Just joking. But no doubt about it, the Winnipeg Jets found a way to score here on this night. But so too did the Toronto Maple Leafs. Everyone is going to find a way to score if they're looking for a mortgage, because you can score a great rate with Cambrian Credit Union. Getting a mortgage doesn't have to throw you off your game. While you focus on home sweet home, our friends at Team Cambrian Credit Union take care of the mortgage part with their low rates. Whether you're looking for a new home, renewing, or making the switch, Cambrian is your mortgage MVP. They can help make the next season of your mortgage path easier and help save you money. Now that's what we call a win. Head to cambrian.mb.ca/rates for more. And Ken, why don't you give Sweet Lou a shout out?
Right on. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, buying, selling, curious what the house in the corner might be going for, contact our main man, Lou Ferlin at Royal LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@louferlin.ca. That's Lou at LOUFURLAN.ca. Lou Ferlin, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including this podcast.
Some people would call, if you were a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you would call the comeback tonight by the Toronto Maple Leafs Herculean. I would call it Ferlanian is what I would do. I'm going to start trying to get that new word, the Lou Ferlanian. That's how impressive it was, I guess, if you're coming from the other side. Dave Sawchuk here asks, Sean, who is responsible? I don't know if he's talking about tonight. I don't know if he's talking about the season. You'll have to expunge.
Yeah, let us know. Yeah.
Let us know. Give us a little bit more. But one thing I wanted to say, Ken, is I had some people expound. Yeah, I had some people reach out to me and ask this question. I think you and I actually had a little bit of a text conversation about it as well. But after Mark Scheifele, and we talked about it on the show, I think Mark Scheifele's dreams were shattered in the last 48 hours here, hearing that he's not going to be on sorry, before we get into Mark Scheifele, the season, I'm going to say it you don't want to go into a position where you simplify this and boil it down to one thing, you know what I mean? But if you are going to do that, I've made my thoughts clear on this. I've made my thoughts clear on this since game 15 of the season so far. The Winnipeg Jets do not have the roster to execute the kind of game they're playing. The roster lands on the general manager. So for the Winnipeg Jets to be where they are right now, if it's one person and this season has gone awry, it's the general manager who has let all the speed on this team go and all the and added, Stanley Cup pedigree and all these different things that basically also came with age and slowing this team down and has made it so I see a team, and I'm going to get into it because I think that there's something to be said here about the Winnipeg Jets and their inability. Like, I think there's an inability for them on a night like tonight to play that clamp it down, shut down game all the way. Like, hey, are we surprised that on the back end of a back-to-back, a Winnipeg Jets team that has struggled with speed so far this year is playing periods 5 and 6, trying to hold a 4-1 lead, and then simply kind of it spirals out of control? Should we be surprised by that? I'm not. I think that one of the reasons the Winnipeg Jets can't play a full 60 minutes is because I don't think they have the roster to play a full 60 minutes. They can't cram the game down your throat for that long. And so on a night like tonight, when we're looking for it was partially the goalie for sure. And all of a sudden they were thinking a little bit too much on offense, not enough on defense. They weren't playing that whole global 360 game. I don't think they can play that global 360 game, and they can't do it on back end of back-to-back. If you would have said to me before this game, without telling me Eric Comrie gives that puck away at the end or what the score was or whatever, but if you would have told me that Toronto kind of takes this game over in the back half of the game, I wouldn't have been surprised one bit. Most teams, it's tough to do that when you're on the back end of a back-to-back, but for the oldest team in the NHL, I think it's really, really tough to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but I mean, a lot of teams are playing back-to-backs, and I mean, it's not a terrible commute from Detroit, but the Jets got stuck on again, this is not an excuse, just for context. The Jets got in at 2:00 in the morning after expecting they'd be in Toronto by closer to midnight, so they had some issues with de-icing and some other things. But again, all teams are going through this. All teams are going through a busy schedule. But yeah, for a team that hasn't been, they're playing mostly every other night. I mean, their performances in recent back-to-backs, early on in the year, I think they were a little better at it. But yeah, I mean, lately the back-to-back in Edmonton, the Jets were nowhere to be found. But that's why the fact they were able to jump out and kind of look like they were going to chase the Leafs out of town made it a little bit more surprising. But I didn't feel like the Jets struggled with the pace from the Leafs in the game, Sean. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, after 4-1, they kind of sat back a little bit at times, and then they kind of got a little bit too casual and went on the attack and didn't kind of fill with the F3s and, having a third man high and those sorts of things. So, I mean, it's sort of, again, we've been talking about this a lot. Jets have been finding a lot of ways to lose, and this was kind of a new way for them in this game. So,
yeah. No doubt about it. Okay, I wanted to get back to what we were talking about, Mark Scheifele. We were kind of wondering about the idea of Mark Scheifele has his heart broken and his dreams kind of crushed in a situation here. And what we saw from Mark Scheifele when this happened to him before the Four Nations last year is a guy who like took off with a vengeance and played like a guy, showing them that you made the wrong decision. I'm going to give you another. I'm going to show you that when you have the chance to make that decision again, you'll get it this time. And that didn't happen for him. So I think for us, we are wondering a little bit of what does the rest of the season look like for Mark Scheifele? Is there a little bit of a broken heart element to this? Is there a little bit of a lack of motivation? There's a lot of people who take a look and, like he said to you, Ken, playing the best hockey of his career. It's been a long runway now of Mark Scheifele playing the best hockey of his career. And I think a lot of people thought, and I am one of those people, that a lot of that was motivation to get to a best on best tournament and represent Team Canada. And now that massive carrot on the end of the stick is not there to be dangled anymore, what was his response going to be like? And I think there were some people who suggested to me, they reached out to me last night after that last game and the top line gets blanked against the Detroit Red Wings, that, I wonder what it's going to look like with Scheifele for the rest of the year. What does tonight's game say about what you expect from Mark Scheifele's response?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's hard to imagine how someone is feeling without having gone through this scenario. There's one part of the scenario that I have gone through, losing a parent, like Mark did last year. I did not ever go through the disappointment of what Mark had in terms of being left in off Four Nations and off the Olympic team. But what I was able to, the one parallel here, and I'm not going to make this about me by any stretch, but during the time where my mom was really sick, I found a way to play some of the best hockey of my career. But the next year when you came back, you aren't running on emotion anymore. So for Mark, he's had to deal with an emotional toll with the death of a parent and two crushing pieces of news from Hockey Canada. So I think that for anyone at any level in any life, whether you're talking about your own job or whether your job is being a professional hockey player, I think you run the risk of having an emotional letdown after dealing with that much disappointment. But to me, what a game like today showed from Mark is his incredible resolve, which is what he's been showing for the better part of a calendar year plus. He went on a absolute tear, as you mentioned, last December. I think 17 points in the month or whatever it was. And his calendar year, Sean, 35 goals and 88 points. I mean, these are ridiculous numbers. So again, it's got to be more than one game, and we expect Mark to continue to push, right through the Olympic break and right up until the point where teams get on the plane and go to Italy. And whether they carry extra players along or not, we'll see. But I expect Mark to have more of the the show me tour than a letdown tour. But again, I think it would be natural for anyone to have an emotional letdown. But I thought Mark was very revealing, Sean, in saying like it's hard for him to talk about today because he's doing his best to turn the page. Because if you don't turn the page, you could really get mired in an emotional rut if you're not able to, again, they're two different people, but I think it's worth referencing. Seth Jarvis, the Winnipegger today, he looked at a old Justin Williams quote. He said, sometimes you got to eat a shit sandwich and chew on it for a while, and then you turn the page and try to make the best of a bad situation. So, in Mark's case, again, he isn't going to use those terms, but I think that Mark's ability to kind of chew on it yesterday and come to a place where, Sean, we know he loves playing here, Ontario guy. Yeah. He's always shown well. I mean, everyone at Wrong Press Row is like, well, you can bet Scheifele's going to do something special in the game today. It's where he scored his first NHL goal here at Scotiabank Arena. And, he gets up for these games. Not that he doesn't get up for other games, but it's not surprising he had a game like this today. And I won't be surprised if he continues to play at an elite level in a kind of last ditch effort to get on that team.
Ken, at the top end of that response, you said, I don't want to make this about you. And then you shared a story about your own personal experience dealing with loss and grief and playing hockey through it. I just want to make it clear. I don't think for a second that's about making it about you. I think that's about you showing a way of connecting a situation, a very human element to a situation like that. I think it takes strength to talk about those kind of things in front of our audience and things like that. And I say this, to our chat room that has talked about loss openly in the past in situations. And we've had some really touching moments and I think some tough conversations in the past. So don't ever apologize, Ken, for taking a personal situation that is vulnerable and strong and bringing it out here to kind of talk about Mark Scheifele, who's gone through loss like you have before, and kind of turn that into something that people can better understand. I think we're lucky and we're lucky to have you talk about it.
Thank you. And I just want to add this too. This is, again, not related, but I love the fact that Scott Arniel went out of his way to A, praise Josh Morrissey, but B, to kind of get on the soapbox and make it known that, I mean, again, we saw it from other coaches, Jeff Blashill about Bedard and some other coaches, but it's important for those players to stick up for their guys. And, you know, I think and that's not just lip service. That's not Scott Arniel trying to not lose Mark Scheifele to an emotional letdown. That's Scott Arniel showing his belief in his player. And as a guy who was part of helping Mark elevate his game and round out his 200-foot game, that's him kind of going to bat for him. And I think Mark Scheifele, like, players hear those sorts of things and they appreciate it. And it goes even deeper than that, Sean. You and I mean, I've mentioned this before. I think it'd be incredibly important and useful for Mark Scheifele to be able to go to one of these best on bests the same way that Dale Hawerchuk did at the Canada Cup. And let's not make any mistakes. Scott Arniel saw the benefits of what Dale went through in going to those events as his best friend. And anyways, I just think that there's a lot of connections at work here. And again, this is not just lip service, but it was something that kind of caught my attention in the pre-game avail today as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, I want to go to the Nino scratch. You had a quick little conversation about it. This is, fairly different. Healthy scratch, as confirmed.
Healthy scratch, yeah.
By Scott Arniel. So the Winnipeg Jets definitely trying something for Scott Arniel. That's about as big a swing as I've seen him make in his time as a Winnipeg Jets coach, of taking someone out of the lineup as an example. What did you take away from it, Ken, and why Nino?
Well, just first and foremost, Scott Arniel doesn't want to embarrass his players. He knows that. I would just put it this way. I think that the Jets have a lot of guys struggling, and there are other people that could say deserved, quote unquote, to sit. But Nino's gone 14 games without a point. And for a guy who's been a almost automatic 20-goal guy, going almost a quarter season without a point is a tough situation. And the other part with Niederreiter, and right away Scott Arniel said to me that it was more related to the Jets playing 3 games in 4 days. It was more schedule related, trying to get a little bit of load management, which again makes sense. I'm sure the player was ticked off about it. Any player who's played as often as Nino Niederreiter would be disappointed. Of course he's disappointed. Luke Schen's disappointed he didn't play against the team that drafted him way back, for what would have been his 1100th game. That's what makes those guys be finished to be in the top 1%, cream of the crop. But I think Nino Niederreiter would understand that situation, that it's for the greater good for him to be sharper in Ottawa on Saturday. But Sean, the important part is after you get scratched, you have to, use that time and get ready to say, hey, you can't take me out again. We've talked about this a lot. I think it's easier, and it's not easy by any stretch. We know how beloved Nino Niederreiter is. We saw it in the messages that he received from the dignitaries and people like Roger Federer that weighed in, Michelin star chefs, heads of state, all of those things. We know how the Jets feel about Nino Niederreiter. We know how the players feel about him. But right now he hasn't been playing well enough. So, and it's easier in the sense that Niederreiter is a winger. If he sits Vlad Nemestikov instead, who again would be a candidate, Sean, based on no goals and 1 assist in now 27 games, now you have to move Morgan Barron back to center, and that's not the issue. It's moving Morgan Barron off the line with Adam Lowry, which has been your second best line of late.
Yes, agreed.
Even though Jonathan Toews has an assist, third assist in 4 games. But again, I don't think they want to break up Barron and Lowry. But again, Nemestikov at some point has to give Scott Arniel a reason not to sit him down.
Yes. Well, the one of the things that I was going to say and I was going to add to that is the idea of sometimes when you bench a beloved player, I think sometimes it's hard to see beloved players being benched, right? And does he deserve it more than a guy like Cole Perfetti right now, more than a guy like Nemestikov, like to the point that you're making here? Probably not. But I think sometimes that effect when you see that guy, especially a guy who you probably understand is going to bounce back from it. And we know that Nino could be a bit of a wrecking ball when he gets back to the top of his game, if he can get there. And, maybe because he's, so, I mean, he's one of the players that lifts up the age range of the Winnipeg Jets. Maybe he comes back a little bit lighter on his toes after taking a little bit of time off here. But sometimes I think that effect is like when you're doing something like that, you're not just doing it to wake up that player, you're doing it to wake up the room. And sometimes if it's a beloved player, it has a greater effect on the people around him to see a guy that they really love being taken out of the lineup. And maybe the message is spread a little bit louder, a little bit further when you do that. Just a suggestion that I'm throwing out there. Okay, I wanted to go in a different direction. Well, I guess what I could say is Scott Arniel probably getting to the stage where he's trying to try as much as he possibly can. He's going in different places that he's never gone before.
Right.
One place that you don't have to worry about Myers Drugs going is across Winnipeg. There's no place they haven't been before in Winnipeg, because if you have any pharmaceutical needs, any nutrition needs, any supplemental needs, Myers Drugs knows how to solve those needs, take care of those needs for you. And like I was just referencing, they'll deliver anywhere in the city. So make sure you give the folks at Myers Drugs a try. Give them a call and they'll come right to you. Okay, let's do this. We're going to the awards right now, and we'll talk about some stuff afterwards if we have the time for it. What do you got for Johnson Group Got You Covered play of the game?
Okay, I got Dylan Samberg on a breaking up the pass to Bobby McMahon from Austin Matthews. I think it was in the second period here. It was a really good play. It looked like it was going to be a breakaway. Samberg saw it at the last second and broke it up.
Yeah, Samberg, that's what he does. He does well.
And there was a really good back check by Cole Perfetti, also a stick lift on a back check. And again, we know Perfetti has been struggling offensively. He did get assists today after having his assist from the other night taken away. But that was a good defensive play on the back pressure. But I think the Samberg play is the one I'm going to go with anyway.
Yeah, a couple candidates. It's funny how in wide open games, it's almost like there will be more gotcha covered plays of the game, just because, dynamic defensive plays are quite often what makes up the Johnston Group gotcha covered play of the game. Like we talk about Connor Hellebuck being big and boring, right? Like sometimes he doesn't make saves look very good, and they're brilliant saves because he's doing the big and boring thing. Well, when you've got your defense locked down, sometimes you don't need to do kind of bombastic defensive plays to break things up. Tonight was definitely a case of a wide open pond hockey game, which led to a couple of those. But that's a good choice, Ken, for the Kenny and Renny OG's Johnson Group got you covered play of the game. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? You need to look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. And that brings us to our hashtag the keg save of the game. What do you got, Ken?
Yeah, this is an easy one for me, Sean.
For everybody.
Easy one. Mark Scheifele, again, this is almost a carbon copy from last night when Gustav Nyquist rattles a shot off the post. This time, Mark Scheifele gets a look, and after a mad scramble in front, the time is winding down. Gabe Velarde battles through, gets it to him backdoor. Scheifele thinks that he's going to put her home, and Hildeby pushes across and makes just an exceptional save to absolutely rob him.
Game saver. The opposite of what you got from Eric Comrie. Game drifter, game giver awayer versus a game saver. If you want to go to the road of saying like making the timely save at the right time, it definitely came on the Toronto Maple Leafs end of the ice, which is why that's Ken's hashtag the keg save of the game. You don't have to agree with them, though. You can have your own. That's what we'd like to see from you. Your hashtag the keg save of the game, because if you share that with us, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 fine keg locations here here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. And the winner from our last show, I think it's another one for Frosty. Frosty, you know what to do. Direct message me at SN Sean Reynolds. Send me your full name. Send me an email. I'll have the fine folks at the Keg send you a $50 gift certificate usable at any of the 3 Fine Keg locations here in the city of Winnipeg, each location finer than the last. Okay, Ken, I just want to go. This is more of a announcement for the Kenny and Renny chat room. I've always got this really good, and I've brought it up on this before. Our guy, Mitch Peacock, who we both know and love and work with quite often. I had a good conversation with Mitch Peacock about the family and everything right before Christmas. It was great to talk with him. He gave me sage advice one time when I wasn't doing this job yet, and I was talking about a Winnipeg Jets coach, and I was saying, you got to move on from this guy, blah, 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 and this and that and whatever. And his response was fine, who are you going to go with? Who's the guy that you're moving to, right? It's easy to be, someone who's not sitting in the hot seat and be like, that's it. We're firing a guy. And I don't care what you do. You got to fire him. I don't care what you do. You have to have a backup plan. You have to have a place that you're going. A lot of times moves aren't made until they know where they're going to go. So this is kind of homework for the Kenny and Renny chat room. We're seeing it a lot in here. There's a lot of fire Chevy kind of sentiment going on in here. You got to know where you're going. So if you're going to give the fire Chevy comments and chants and all those kind of things, see right off the bat, Alex99 is saying Pete DeBoer. Pete DeBoer has never been a GM before. He's a coach. So right off the bat, Alex99 is fire Chevy, bring in Pete DeBoer, right? So that's a decision to go in a different place and give a longtime coach a GM nod. That's something, but at least Alex is following kind of the ask here. If you're going to be one of the people who's going out and saying, do this, fire this guy, blah, blah, come with the solution. Don't just say, scream at the clouds. Come with the solution. Who do you see moving in and fixing the situation that the Winnipeg Jets find themselves in? And then I'm going to go to this afterwards. Ken, I thought this would be a good conversation to have. Our guy, Gift Guy, says, I'm surprised the Jets can still sell as many tickets as they have. And he also said something earlier on, and I know Gift Guy really well, about, he doesn't live in the city, he's on the outside of the city, hard for him to come in and watch a losing team, he'd said here. There's other comments from people here who's right here, creases from Earth or creasing from Earth says, I'm a ride or die with the Jets. I've seen a couple more of these. This is my response here. Paul Robert with a good one here who says, sell out games and get loud to show True North we can handle a step back, retool / rebuild. They don't think we can. I actually think Paul Robert is right with this, because when you hear Mark Chipman talk about it, he says that the one thing that we need in Winnipeg is we need a winning hockey team. I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's sustainable. You're not an NHL city if you can't bear a losing NHL team, because at some point it's going to happen. So I agree with Paul Robert in this thing here. I'll just say this before I hand it over to you, Ken. You take a look at the Winnipeg Jets schedule over the last little while, and this is so I get that some people are like Gift Guy. It sounds like I don't think it's a stretch for me to kind of identify or define what Gift Guy is as a fan, but Gift Guy is a fan of the Winnipeg Jets. I don't necessarily think he's a hockey fan, because if you can't stand to watch the Jets unless they're winning, I think that means you're a very specific fan of a team that you can't bear to see them lose. I take a look at this and I see that the last game the Winnipeg Jets played that you could buy tickets to was against the Edmonton Oilers, a game they lost 3-1 to the Edmonton Oilers, where you saw two of the best hockey players of this generation and maybe one of the very best top 3 players that the NHL will ever have in Connor McDavid, and he was just rolled into town, into Winnipeg, and played hockey for you in front of you in your building. The Minnesota Wild are the team that the Winnipeg Jets play at home before that. Minnesota Wild has one of the most dynamic ever of all time offensive defensemen on the back end on there, and a really, really solid team coming in here. You rewind before that, they play the Senators, who've got some really great players on that team, a Canadian rivalry that that you get to go check out. The game before that, the Washington Capitals, where you had a chance to see the all-time greatest goal scorer in the history of the NHL come in and add to his already record for the most goals ever. You get an original 6 team in the Bruins. Before that, you get the second best team in the hockey that is rife with star players in the Dallas Stars. For me, Ken, I remember what it was like to lose the Winnipeg Jets when I was 17 years old back in 1996. Right. And see them walk away. And the one thing that I always understood as a hockey fan was I like hockey. I'm a hockey fan. So for me, if the Winnipeg Jets are a team that is rebuilding, yes, I get it. And I've said this in the past, and I do think there are times where fans should vote with their dollars if they don't feel they're being listened to, if they think that they're being taken for granted, if they're not getting what they should be getting with the ticket that they buy, all those kind of things. They're customers, and customers should be serviced. So there's a time to sit on your wallet and vote with your wallet. I have never thought that time is when you're taking a step back to try to get better, when you're building a young team, when you're trying to turn things around, when you end up outside of the playoffs and working your way back up. Think of 2015. The Winnipeg Jets make the playoffs, and then they fall back in 16 and 17. They retool a little bit and end up going on that run, which I think was the greatest chance the Winnipeg Jets have ever had as an organization to winning the Stanley Cup. And I still to this day believe the Winnipeg Jets had the best roster in hockey in both 2018 and 2019. And it's because they chose in 2015, after making the playoffs, to take a step back and rebuild. For me, hockey is enough. Watching world-class hockey where world-class players come in and perform in front of you. I'll tell you this. My cousin was in town over the Christmas break. His young boy Atlas and his daughter came in. His daughter Liv came in, and they were in for practice. They wandered over when the Edmonton Oilers were here. He got a puck and a fist bump from Connor McDavid, who came out to talk to some of the young fans there. These are irreplaceable memories. That is something that my young firebrand of a nephew is going to remember for the rest of his life. I remember what it was like to be young and see players and things like that. It is special, not just to have an NHL team, not just to have an NHL team that wins, but special to have the NHL and the opportunity to see the very best players come in and show you how good the game that we love can be. I just think that the idea of tuning out because the Winnipeg Jets are not winning games is absolutely ridiculous. I believe Winnipeggers are hockey fans. I believe this is a hockey city. I believe it's one of the best hockey cities in the world. So I think the idea of staying away because the Winnipeg Jets are losing is ridiculous. I think it's ludicrous. I think that the Winnipeg Jets fans and Winnipeg hockey fans are going to show up to see the greatest game in the world played at the very highest level, because what a privilege it is to have that played in our very own city, Ken.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strong way to say it. I mean, it's important. I mean, it's not going to always be rosy, and this year has not been rosy for the Jets. I mean, to your point about the world-class talent that just rolled through town, the Jets sold out the last 2 of their games, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are coming in a couple weeks here. So I expect that, there's 4 sellouts so far. I expect the Leafs game will be sold out. It almost always is. And I think that people are still, they're into it. I mean, we saw in the games coming out of the break, the atmosphere was a little bit louder. It wasn't playoff atmosphere, of course. It's not the playoffs, but they seem to be a little bit more into it. Maybe it's a holiday season or whatever else. But I mean, I think people are into it. Sean, we've seen it yourself, and I'm sure you did it yourself. I remember times, getting in the car with buddies and, driving to Edmonton for playoff games when the Jets weren't there. Right. Yeah. So one of the years I ended up jumping in with some buddies that got tickets. I got a press pass. It was when the Dallas Stars were great. Mike Keane was on the team, Grant Ledgard, Ed Belfour, all kinds of Manitoba content. I ended up writing about them for the Winnipeg Sun. I mean, but again, that meant getting in the car, packing a lunch, packing a picnic, and, trying to get in line for last second tickets. I mean, I understand this is, early 2000s, but people love hockey in this town. Now, again, full rebuild versus a tear down versus, what level of retooling. Again, I think there are risks attached for sure. And Sean, I mean, we saw it last year. The Jets were the best team in the NHL during the regular season, and it took a late surge to be up, I think 1,500 fans on average per game, and to get a bunch of sellouts late. So, winning wasn't an automatic for selling out every single game like they used to. But again, work is being done. And again, at some point, we're going to have to see where things go. If it goes sideways and the Jets are a top 5 lottery team, again, I think they will be support still. But I think also, having a top 5 pick, if that's the case, especially if it's a top 3 pick, I think that can inject some enthusiasm to the fan base that is obviously going to be disappointed given the level of expectation that the Jets organization, players, fan base had for them going into the year as a Stanley Cup contender. Being in last place on January 1st is something nobody had on their bingo card. So how they handle this next stretch of time will be fascinating. I know a bunch of people in the chat room have asked, what's the cutoff date? When do you decide? That I think is still very much up in the air and will depend on how this next stretch of game goes. But I said this to you the other day, Sean, and I think you agree. I don't think the Jets are going in a full sale, fire sale. If they do at all, it will not be before probably February, maybe February 4th, where the Olympic break shows up, or 5th, whatever the game after Montreal is. But again, that's not to say things can't happen before that, but I don't think the Jets would be getting into the, signing off on the season at any time before that, if at all.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple things here. Matt Hyman pulls out a sentiment that I've seen. I don't know if it's him over and over again. I think there's a couple people out there who will say that. Renny also doesn't pay for Jets tickets, does he? Well, it's my job to be at the games and cover the games. So yes, I consider myself blessed for someone who loves hockey to be able to have access to and see hockey as much as I do. You forget the idea, Matthew Hyman, that before it became my job to go to hockey games, I was a fan of hockey who went to hockey games, and I would put myself, especially as a kid from the country who used to go in when I was young with my dad, drive into the city, stopping at Safeway to buy tickets to the game and go to the old Winnipeg Arena and get home at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning as a young kid and get up and go to school the next day. I'll put my record of going to hockey games before this was my job up against a lot of people's out there, especially someone who is as broke as I was, and that includes Moose games when that was the only option in Winnipeg. So yeah, I don't pay to go to hockey games right now. I'm not preaching and trying to say that you should be at every single hockey game like I'm at. I'm not saying that about anyone. I'm saying, listen, for me, it's about a love of hockey. And so to say this, I think is kind of trying to take away from my point. I think it's doing it in a dishonest manner. So I just wanted to point that out. And then this one here, Dixon Sider said, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that out loud, Ken. Is it only about liking hockey? I'm a bit pissy that Chevy won't speak. Don't fans deserve some answers or a bit of accountability from the guy making the decision? I'll say this, I don't disagree with this sentiment. I'm not telling you, and that's why I said sometimes I think it's up to fans to vote with their wallet to make sure that they're getting the product that they want. I'm not saying blindly go and buy tickets and do whatever. You as a fan have a right to say, I don't like the direction that the team is going. I want the team to be having a greater conversation with me. This is something that I've really supported in the past. In fact, if you go back, I don't know how many shows it was, about 6 or 7 or 8 shows ago, Ken, it was one of the last things I said on this show that I thought that the Winnipeg Jets needed to be out. And you know it, Ken, because I've texted you about it in the background. I think there needs to have been a more direct conversation with the fans. I don't think we're at a situation right now where, Kevin Cheveldayoff's probably going to come out at game 41, the halfway point of the season, Ken, and address the media. That's what we expect.
That's the expectation. Right? Yes, sir.
And so that's what typically happens in a normal year. This is not a normal year. What's happened to the Winnipeg Jets is not normal at all. They've become the only team in NHL history to go from winning the President's Trophy to last in the NHL heading into that next year. This is not normal. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Abnormal happenings should lead to abnormal schedules. Kevin Cheveldayoff should have addressed this and stepped in front of a microphone about this a long time ago before the Winnipeg Jets dropped from second in the Western Conference to last place in the league. How you have to drop that far and there's still not a conversation. I agree entirely. With that sentiment. So let me make this abundantly clear. I thought I did already, everybody. A comment like that is maybe a little bit of a sign that maybe people aren't understanding what I'm saying. I think you as fans have to continue making it clear what you expect. If you expect more from a team, more of a conversation, if you expect your owner or your GM to be more engaged and have more conversations with you, that's your right as ticket buyers and as consumers of Winnipeg Jets games on TV, of stuff at the Jets gear store, all the support that you give to the Winnipeg Jets, you have every right to demand what you want from the team. I'm just saying it's unrealistic, and it's why I think the Jets made a mistake talking about competing every single year and saying that that's what you need is a team that competes every single year. I think that's unrealistic in the NHL. I think it's obvious. I think if you take a look around the league, there are 31 other examples of that. Like the Detroit Red Wings, I went back and looked at some of their things for my research and it forgot, I don't know how I did, how dominant that team was for how long, and then how long they've been struggling for. Look at the Buffalo Sabres, just jumped into the playoffs. Look what the Edmonton Oilers were before they turned things around and went to the last couple. You're going to lose at some point. So my point is, if you consider yourself a fan of hockey, you are not a fan of hockey if your team loses and that's it, you check out. Now, the conditions of why they're losing, and maybe if you find that your team, your management staff, your ownership group is not listening to the fans and not doing the right things and they're not taking it seriously, then, hey, you can vote with your wallet. But teams are going to be bad if you think that your team is still trying and still going. This is my take on it. Hockey fans should be supporting hockey. Should they be willy-nilly supporting a business that is not giving them what they expect as customers? No, but I think you're seeing the distinction that I'm making there. Ken, anything to say before we get going here?
No, Happy New Year. I know we saw it yesterday, but it was prior to midnight. So thanks to everyone for being with us. We're going to continue this ride.
Yeah, no doubt. And hey, we topped out at 500
lives. Good.
Live. People are fired up. People want to talk about these kind of things. And I want to tell you, Ken and I will be right here in this space. We won't let you down. We'll be here talking about it over and over and over again. So if you appreciate those conversations happening in this space, I would implore you to appreciate and to support our sponsors who fight to keep the conversation going in this space. For us, that's Jim Pattison Toyota on Region, Vittorio Rossi, Cambrian Credit Union, Pristine Roofing, Sweet Lou Furlan, Flame and Comfort, the folks at Myers Drugs, of course, the Kenny and Renny OGs in the Johnston Group, and yes, our fine folks at the Keg. Thank you to them. Thank you to all of you. Let's do this all again Saturday night when both Ken and I will be in Ottawa for Hockey Night in Canada, and the latest opportunity for the Jets to put an end to this losing streak. Ken's got something to say before we go.
Just quickly, check out my story on Josh Morrissey. I know I wrote online edition, but Josh was great in his pregame availability and told some great stories about what it was like to find out from Jim Nill that he was on the team and what it meant to him and what the day was like. So check that out, along with my game analysis from today's game in the Winnipeg Free Press. Thanks for the plug earlier.
Yeah, well, hey, it's well-deserved. Okay, that's it for us. We'll see everybody on after Hockey Night in Canada. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.